Welcome to episode 33 of the Thelma Tapes, the Living Memory Association podcast. This edition is a compilation of vivid music-based reminiscence from the 1950s to the 1980s, packed with recollections of the Beatles, Bowie, Elvis, Generation X, The Specials, and many more. We hear tales of getting free concert tickets from Tom Waits on Greenside Place, of sheltering the Cure under an Edinburgh Broadway, of punk-era standoffs, homemade fanzines, gigs galore, and cherished vinyl records. Back in time we go.
One of the things I remember very vividly at the Cramps was a very good friend of mine throwing her sweaty, battered old shoe onto stage, getting filled with champagne, the singer drinking from it, and then throwing it back to her. And that shoe remained on her mantelpiece for years after. Pride of place, never worn again.
We had a radiogram, one of the old-fashioned ones, where it was both a radiogram and a record player, and my mum and dad were never short of telling me that I could actually play the record player before I could walk, you know.
So it was in your blood?
Yeah, definitely. Although I wasn't as careful with the records then as a bairn as I am now, looking after them and making sure you hold them on the outside and not put your thumbs on the... But one of the few regrets I have in life is that I, not meaningly, but broke my dad's Elvis 78s.
Ooh.
What made it even more painful is that how much as that puppy in the window survived. And I played it relentlessly.
Oh.
The records that I remember being around the house, and that were probably my mum's, were Engelbert Humperdinck, and I remember Please Release Me and 10 Guitars were two of his songs, and Val Doonican she liked. And the one that I always remember with Val Doonican was Paddy McGinty's Goat, because I quite liked that. Mind, I'd only be about 8 at the time. This is in the 60s. I was born in 58.
I remember being an Elvis fan in the prefabs, because there was a guy next door, annoyingly enough, looked like a bit like Elvis, you know. And of course, record players were few and far between in those days. Yeah. My dad bought a radiogram, and it was fantastic. You could put 8 records in this thing and play, you know, they just dropped down. But I remember playing Elvis stuff on the radiogram, and the kids would come round to my house just to listen to Elvis. And it was indoctrination from an early age.
Sort of got through my mod phase, and I'd sort of gone into this sort of, I don't know, kind of gothy punk phase, I suppose, if you like. You know?
I'm just trying to picture that.
Yeah, I had long hair, you know, and for those... it's not great radio when you're trying to describe folks here, but yeah, I've got no hair now. But
your friends will be laughing.
They'll be laughing, yes. But yeah, I had a full head of hair, all black, back-combed, mohawk-type style.
Jeepers.
And I remember walking down towards the playhouse in the pouring rain one day, and with my brolly up to protect my said back-combed mop of black hair, when his head popped under the brolly and said, "All right, mate, do you mind if I share your brolly?" And that was none other than Robert Smith from The Cure.
Jeepers.
Claim to fame.
And you would have had quite similar hair, if I'm
well,
thinking
actually,
back.
we did, and I was going to the gig that night.
Wow.
So,
Did he say...
I don't think he recognised me. I don't think he knew who I was.
When I first started working full-time, I knew that I wanted to get myself a record deck, amp and speakers, you know, so I could properly hear the music, because the radiogram that the folks had at home was just played mono, really, which was all right for Dr. Feelgood, because they actually recorded their stuff in mono, but there were some folk that actually did stereo, you know, this newfangled thing. And they were talking about quadraphonic at the time as well. But because you weren't allowed credit, because I was under 21, my dad had to sign to guarantee that if I didn't make the payments to Comet, then he would actually have to step up to the plate. So we went down to Comet New Haven Road and got...
You remember it,
yeah, and I've still got that record deck, amp and speakers. Yeah, so I've got my money's worth.
What make was it?
It's a Pioneer deck, trio amp, and then Solovox speakers, which were actually just Wharfdale in disguise.
God, actually, that's a good setup, wasn't it? That must have put you...
Yeah, it was a good couple of £100 at the time, you know, which is... Because I still remember my dad saying outside, "You better make every payment, son." Quite right and all.
I had a friend who, great Tom Waits fan, and Tom Waits was playing at the Playhouse, and him and his mate, they were both unemployed, no money, couldn't afford a ticket, and they're wandering down Leith Walk, and lo and behold, coming towards them down is Tom Waits, and he's got his notepad out, you know, maybe writing some songs or something like that. So they chat with him, and he's great, you know, he's friendly and everything, and they say, well, you know, big fans but can't make it in. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll leave 2 tickets for you.
Bless him.
I know, bless him. Anyway, they're ecstatic. Now, although they can't get money for tickets, they seem to get money for booze. So they spent...
There's always money for booze, man.
Yeah. They spent the afternoon basically getting hammered. So when it came time to go to the Playhouse and pick up their tickets, they were so away with it, they wouldn't actually let them in. So
Excellent. Pure guys.
I know.
I think the first record that I remember buying for myself was a single by Leapy Lee. Little Arrows it was called, and it was a catchy wee tune, and I do remember buying that. I don't remember how much it cost. Must have had the pocket money, or must have got it for something special, maybe a birthday or a Christmas thing. So yeah, that would be the first one that I actually bought myself. So Little Arrows by Leapy Lee, who was I think just a one-hit wonder, and never heard of him again.
First one I bought was called Beatles for Sale, 1964 I think, and that was the first one I bought. And the reason I bought that was I was going out with a girl at the time, Young Love, and there was a song on it called 8 Days a Week, and that was her favourite song.
The one that I really remember that year in 75 was actually the sensational Alex Harvey Band Christmas show at the Apollo, and it was just brilliant. It was just before all these things sort of changed and all, so I got tickets in October that year because Bowie had announced that he was coming back to Wembley, so that was the Cellar tour, station to station, and it was fantastic. There was no support band, again, real theatre there as well, and that he had the Dali Buñuel film in Shin Andalou, and because it's a silent film, he used Kraftwerk as the backing music for it, really worked. And then when the film finished, the screen went up and the band started launching into, the band were there, just bright white light, and it was the station-to-station riff, and of course they cranked it until Bowie himself came on and the place just erupted, But one of the gigs, for me, one of the gigs.
Being involved in the music scene as I was, fanzines were the thing at the time. That was the way to, everybody did them. They seemed to be 10 a penny, all of varying standards, as you can imagine. But a good friend of mine was at art college and was very arty and that kind of thing. He knew how to put a good picture together. And we used to go around interviewing bands and creating fanzines and then selling them at gigs or selling them, we'll put them into, all the record shops that existed in Edinburgh at the time. It was a lot more than there was now, It was Vinyl Villains, Ripping Records, Avalanche, and loads of other little independent ones as well. So they used to sell them for us and take a commission. We'd go in and see how many we'd sold. Always disappointed, of course. We knew we were never going to make it, but nonetheless it was good. It was excellent times, and quite often got you into gigs for free, or you got you free records. We got a lot of records sent to us, that we could review, so that was it. Lots of white labels, that was the thing to have at the time.
One of the guys that used to play football with had his arithmetic O-level the next again day, and therefore couldn't use his ticket to go and see Genesis. So my first gig was Genesis doing the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour with Peter Gabriel still frontman.
I was going to say, this is the before Genesis of Phil Collins taking over.
Yeah, that's right, aye. And I still remember it because it was great theatre. I mean, he had a range of costumes, and I still remember the encore where he was doing the knife and they were using the strobe lights and he was using the mic stand as if he was stabbing the audience. It was sensational. You just turn it right round on its head and he's, really going for it. A fantastic gig to go to. But also meant that, when you were going to other things, they really had to put on a show.
I saw The Who live and Amen Corner, a few things. There was a few bands in the 60s played in the Waverley Market, and I saw the Love Affair there and the Pretty Things and a few other bands, but they also had resident bands, like Edinburgh resident bands that played there as well, like the Embers and the Moonrakers and things like that, but the big groups.
So who was your favourite then?
But live band, The Who, because they were relatively new at the time when they played at Magoo's, and they were terrific. The resident band at the Magoo's was called the Moonrakers. They did covers. Everything they covered was The Who. And I saw, Reg Presley? Saw them there as well. Because I was always at the dancing 3 nights a week, and it was mainly Magoo's, which was up in the High Street. But there was other clubs. Rygo Street at Tollcross, there was one called the Gonk. They had a resident band, I think they were called the Hunters. And then there was the Place in the Gamp, the Top Story, of course.
These are clubs.
These are all dance. They were called dance clubs at the time, not dance halls, dance clubs. The Magoo's was the biggest one in Edinburgh. They had about 3,000 members, and you subscribed to it like a membership. But it wasn't much. It was like you paid a £5 or £4, and that was you as a member for life. But you still had to pay to get in.
Did you have to, if it was a big band like The Who, did you have to
pay extra
for tickets?
You had to pay, get a ticket.
Yeah.
But because you were a member, you got it a wee bit cheaper. Any big band, if you were a member, you got a wee bit cheaper.
The town council, of which I'm a member now, in their wisdom, deemed that punk rock was not good enough for their citizens and was too dangerous. So I still remember the council pulling a gig by Generation X at Clouds. So the promoters then had to get us all on buses out to East Linton, but we were drinking in what's now the Exotic Dancers Triangle at Westport. But at that time, it was the Birkin Hare, and I still remember coming out there, and then there was these guys that came out the pub that was across the road, and sort of a disco place type thing underneath where the old GPO office used to be in Tower, and they said, "Oh, punks, let's go for them." And I managed to negotiate with one of their guys and said, "Look, send your people back. We're just gone down to the Clouds anyway, so we'll be away in a couple of minutes." And he said, "Right, aye, I'll do that, pal." But one of the guys that was with us, Henry, who was straight, wasn't drinking, didn't like drinking that, was so disgusted at their behaviour that he set fire to his shirt. I know, fantastic.
So he wasn't drunk, but he set light to his shirt.
Yeah, because he wanted to show solidarity with us, because we were getting picked on for the way we were dressed. And then 9 of us piled into the car and went down to East Linton, and because they thought the gig might get pulled down there, Gen X went on first, and then the support band, who became Simple Minds, went on after them.
I was trying to dredge my memory for LPs. I do remember once buying Supertramp was the name of the group, and it was Crime of the Century. It was the album, and I think that was an early one. But I think a lot of the time you borrowed albums for friends, and you swapped albums and things, so it became a wee bit hazy if I'd bought that. But I think maybe swapped it or bought it for one of my friends even.
First record that you brought in, and that's Dr. Feelgood. Why? Tell us about that.
Because I seen them at Leith Town Hall in 1975, and they were sensational, and they were just such a difference to all the prog rock nonsense that was happening at the time, I mean, you couldn't get further away from Tales from Topographic Oceans than Dr. Feelgood.
The next one that I really remember was The Jam, and that was out at Ingliston, and that was 1983, I think. Obviously that kind of set the tone for my musical taste for quite a while afterwards, two big mod bands. And
that's right.
So, quite memorable.
And again, The Who's obviously excellent live, and so would The Jam.
The Jam were fantastic, The Jam were amazing. I remember the highlight of the night was meeting, we were very early. Right. Because the thing with Ingliston was there's no seats or anything, so you just had to go first come, first served. So we were there about 3 hours before the gig started, front of the queue type of thing, and we got in early, and we met Bruce Foxton, who was so we bumped into him. He was sort of sound checking or whatever the hell he was doing at the time, and two very sort of young, eager wee boys, as we were at the time, 15 years old, and meeting Bruce Foxton, our hero, one of our heroes, at the time.
Brilliant,
so, I remember another cool day at school the next day.
I suspect people weren't believing you when you said...
Well, there was an element of that. I just still tell folk now, and they go, "Really? What, 13? Well, yes, and there's a programme."
There was various pubs in that used to do stuff, you go to the Yellow Carvel, which is now the Trom pub. Nicky Tam's in Victoria Street was always good, and they didn't charge, so you were going in to see bands, because there was a band that used to play there on Nicky Tam's on the Thursday night, and I loved going because they used to always finish with Southern Man, Neil Young song. The drink was dear though, a pint of lager and lime was 17.5 pence. Shocking, I know, shocking. I can see you're appalled.
Your favourite sort of single or favourite song at the time was called Please Stay, and they were a group called the Crying Shames. They were around at the same time as the Beatles. They were from Liverpool. That was the only record that they ever made that did anything. After that, nothing. But I've still got that vinyl to this day.
First record was Lily the Pink, The Scaffold, and I loved it because I used to remember that you used to see people like that, and there was a kids programme, and I don't know how they got away with it, called Do Not Adjust Your TV Set. The first lot of the Pythons and that came through that programme, and it was really quite anarchic. But I loved it for that reason.
There was about 10 dance clubs that you could go to at one time in Edinburgh. International, Princess Street, Walkers and Shamrock Place. The Plaza at Morningside. The resident band was called Stella and the Kentones. I actually knew her. I found out later on that she worked beside my wife in the brewery, in the offices. Yeah, there was always a dance on a Friday. We used to go to, I worked at that time in the Fish. fish factories, and we would go to the dancing on a Friday night and then be there till about maybe 2 in the morning, and then we would just get a taxi down to work to start working to get ready for the fish market in New Haven. So
straight for the dancing to the
straight,
work.
So you would have fish for your breakfast.
You couldn't have done it the other way.
No, no.
Straight for the fish to the dancing. That would be a lingering smell.
That was a thing. It was always a joke, and when we worked in the fish, because of the smell, I used to use every Friday or every Saturday a bottle of Brut on my hands.
Oh yeah.
And then
rub
of course
it all over.
you'd be at the dance, and then of course when the heat hit, the smell, you had to walk away. If you were dancing with somebody, you had to walk away.
I was lucky in seeing The Who at Parkhead that summer and the Stones at Nebworth as well. That gig went on for ages because Lynyrd Skynyrd blew the whole amp set, so they had to get that replaced. Phenomenal gigs.
The other thing that seems to be in my memory is buying With the Beatles, one of the first Beatles LPs, which was, and that must have been a good bit later, but that's one of the first things I remember having.
Can you remember how much the first record you bought?
The first one I bought.
The Beatles, this is an LP. How much would an LP have been?
Oh God.
10 bob? Would it
It
be as
would
much
be
as
something
that?
like 17 and 6 or something.
Oh, it would be that.
Something
it would be
like
about,
that. Something like that.
yeah.
But then, of course, we were making a lot of money on the fish because we were never away from the place. So if I fancied it, I just bought it.
Just go to.
Clothes as well. We used to shop in like the berries and all these and buy you had to have the latest gear for going out and meeting the birds.
Yep.
Through my teens, I was an absolute avid lover of music and live gigs. At the time, I suppose, mid-80s in Edinburgh, there was a huge indie scene, and Glasgow, and lots of bands. I remember when you used to look at the indie charts of the day, lots of local Edinburgh and Glasgow bands in there, Yeah, there was a huge scene, lots of different venues, not like now, unfortunately, but lots of great wee music venues in Edinburgh. So yeah, we used to go a couple of times a week to see bands.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was the sort of cost of it? Was it reasonably?
I remember it was doable because I wouldn't have been on a great salary at the time. I think my salary, I remember my first paycheck, I think it was £45 a week, and I felt incredibly rich at the time. But actually, by the time you paid rent and food and everything, that was, you weren't left with anything really. No. But I still managed to go to gigs, and strangely, I always managed to have money for beer as well. Miles, as
so, we pointed out.
I think I used to go to one place which is off Victoria Street called the Onion Cellar. And Onion Cellar was quite a main venue for, if you like, indie bands of the day. You used to go, and you never got a ticket, you got a raffle ticket when you went in, or a stamp in the back of your hand. It was affordable, and I think predominantly student crowd or youngish crowd, so yeah, but it was good. Great days.
One of the groups that burst through was the Specials, and again the Specials did that reportage from the front line as well. Everybody can remember Ghost Town, because it just seemed to be a commentary on Britain at the time. But the Specials were actually one of the things that punk allowed to happen, was that they came through, and then people like the Clash took them on tour with them, to actually say, listen to these people, they've got something to say. And again at the time, because of the National Front being on the go, a mixed race band, which the Specials were, was actually a very, very strong message, and especially for places like Coventry, you were starting to lose the industries that were sustaining the local economy, and they were highly political as well. So Jerry Dammers came out with the song Free Nelson Mandela. It's a rare example of where a tune actually achieved something politically, because we did get him free.
Thank you so much to Graham, Gordon, Ian, Derek and the two Johns for their wonderful memories of the soundtracks to their lives. If you have a story to share, please pop in to see us at the Wee Museum of Memory on the second floor of Ocean Terminal in Leith. Or you can drop us an email at comhist@googlemail.com, that's comhist@googlemail.com, and we can arrange to record your memories by the magic of a Zoom call. You can also visit our Facebook page to keep up with our regular events and view our wonderful photo videos and much more on our YouTube channel just by searching for the Living Memory Association. We also have a brilliant website at www.livingmemory.org.uk hosting over 3,000 photos in conjunction with Edinburgh Collected. If you've enjoyed this podcast, our further reminiscence and music shows Life Story, Leith Lives, Forgotten Songs from the Broom Cupboard and Analog Rory's Jukebox can all be accessed from the Projects tab on our website or via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until next time, we bid you farewell.